Hello. Tonight's episode topic brought to us by Ray Garcia, one of our listeners. Thank you, Ray, for sending this in. So tonight's story comes from the towering limestone bluffs of the Mississippi River, near the small river town of Alton, Illinois. For centuries, travelers passing these cliffs whispered about a creature painted high upon the rock face. A monster with the body of a dragon, antlers like a deer, the claws of an eagle, and the wings wide enough to darken the sky. The native people of the region called it Piasa, a word often translated as the bird that devours men. According to legend, this creature didn't just live in myth. It hunted. It circled the river valleys, snatching hunters and warriors from the ground below and carrying them away to be eaten in their cliffside lair. But the most unsettling part isn't the story or the monster itself, it's the painting. For generations, witnesses described a massive image of the Piasa bird painted high up on the bluff, so large it could be seen from passing riverboats. Early explorers claimed it was ancient. Others said it marked the site of a desperate battle between a tribal chief and the creature that terrorized his people. Was it a warning? A memorial? Or proof that the legend began with something real? So tonight we dig into the mystery of the Piasa bird.
What do you see when you're in the dark and the demons come?
1, 2, married stories for you.
Welcome to Buried Stories. I'm Jeff Mercurio. Along with me tonight, we got Wendell Brown. How are you, Wendell?
Good, Jeff. How are you?
Good. And we got Steve Mercurio. Steve, how are you?
Good, man. I'm good. This is exciting. First of all, I just want to say thank you to Ray Garcia. What a great story. I mean, this is something exciting to talk about. I love stories like this.
Well, give us a little bit about what you found in this, Steve.
Well, I mean, a very similar story. It's weird. When I was looking in this, first thing I started thinking about was, why are they calling it a bird? It kind of seemed more like a dragon, right? Like
Yeah.
they mentioned it having scales and everything. And we could talk about that further, but it's interesting that they referred to this as a bird. I almost feel like this is more about a dragon than anything.
Definitely. I kind of picked that up myself. So Wendell, go ahead with the Piasa.
Well, you guys were talking, I had never heard of this. And you guys were talking about it, and I was thinking bird, big bird, people getting overreacting to a big bird. You guys are talking about a chimera looking thing. I mean, Steve's right. It's a dragon with a bird with a bunch of features of dragons and eagles, but it's as big as a horse.
Yeah.
And so I was surprised. That there was a story out there like this that I haven't heard from, especially along the Mississippi River. But no, but I'm as interested as anybody to hear your guys' take on it.
Well, when I started researching this, I kind of felt like it could be not lumped in, but almost like a skinwalker itself. This bird is massive, and the Indians got some great lore, but every lore comes from it's got to start with somebody perceiving something. So I don't know what the original person saw, but damn, if they came up with this bird, it had to be huge.
Yeah, this thing was humongous. It wasn't
Right.
just big, it was humongous.
Yeah.
But I was surprised. Surprised it was so big and that there wouldn't be more about it out there in the mainstream. But you know, take it away, Steve.
Well, no, I just when I heard, I think some of the more fascinating features about what they're talking about is this thing having, I think they mentioned beard like a tiger's. Like
Mm,
that, I mean, that's
yeah.
interesting. Think about it for a second. Like, and look at almost any natural bird you see in the wild today. Very rarely do you see what would be kind of considered like facial feathers or anything like that, right? I mean, you generally speaking, so I thought that that stood out, and horns like a deer. I mean, that kind of feels almost like what is it? The wind, what is the one, the cryptid that,
Wendigo.
yeah, when they
Yeah.
yeah, because
Wendigo.
that's got,
Wendigo.
yeah, Wendigo. And it's got the deer's, like, right? It's got the antlers like a deer and everything. So, it's
Absolutely.
interesting when you think about it, scales that were what? Red, black, and green. I mean, at a time you would think like animals when they if you believe in like animals evolving, right? And they tend to take colors that are kind of in their area. Where does the I could see the green, but where does the red and black come in? You know what I mean? From a standpoint. Yeah.
Well, French explorer Jacques Marquet wrote about seeing a large painted monster on the bluffs in 1673 during his exploration of the Mississippi River. So, I mean, this is an old legend here. It goes back. Jacques Marquette, he described it horns of a deer. It had red eyes. There, those red eyes again. A tiger like beard, a somewhat human face, a scaly body, and a tail that wrapped around its body and ended like a fish tail.
Jeff, do you have that
Oh,
picture I sent you earlier?
yeah, yeah,
Can you show Steve that? Steve, I had Chat GPT pull up a picture of that bird uh, based on the Indian lore.
yeah.
I said it in St. Augustine. I sent it to Jeff. I don't know if you can pull it up or not, Jeff.
I can't pull it up onto the
All right.
computer right now.
All
Yeah,
right. But if you've ever seen a chimera, that's what it looks like.
right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm kind of familiar with the chimera, and I would agree with you
Yeah,
very much so. If anything, like I said, it was kind of hard to describe this as a bird. But I guess if you're going from kind of like laying one language to another, something with wings, you would kind of first maybe think about a bird versus potentially a dragon, because I don't know
right,
if Native Americans would have a word for a dragon or if they've ever described anything. So I think bird may come to them in maybe how they would exchange their language, right? Like if you're trying
right.
to, I think bird would probably come to them first before dragon or chimera, something like that.
But a chimera was a lion, wasn't it? A lion, like with dragon wings kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So,
Well, I'll tell you what, this lore had to start with something. So, what do you guys think killed somebody in the tribe, and then somebody saw something? So, what they see that you could start describing of what it looked like. It's crazy.
yeah, like I said, I had never heard of it before you guys brought it up. So, I haven't heard a lot about this. I haven't heard of any incidents with it. Have you guys heard of specific incidents with it?
Nothing specific, but it did used to attack the Indian tribe. And they lost some people to it. So their legend stemmed from something attacking them.
So, I mean, if you think about it, though, we just kind of mentioned the Wendigo, right? And the
Right,
Wendigo, from my understanding, is a story about a human essentially like eating another human, and then that hunger that you feel, it's unquenchable, right? That's kind of the way a Wendigo is formed by a human eating another human, starting a hunger that essentially, right? So if you kind of think about the direction that this story's going, it kind of has that Wendigo thought, right? It's something that's eating other men. Now, I'm not saying the origins would have been another human that would have turned into this thing, but I think you see a little bit of kind of mixed lore in between those two. And then you can also touch the Thunderbird. It's my understanding. Thunderbird is a Native American lore,
Yeah.
right? It's a story of
Mhm.
mammoth bird. And it usually tends to be more westward, but I think you can find roots in this. I mean, Jeff, you said this thing goes back to the 1600s. I know they were talking about the Thunderbird back then,
Yeah,
as
yeah.
potential. And then I'd like to throw this out too. I just recently heard stories about pterodactyls being filmed potentially in Texas, in this
Yeah.
river basin in Texas. They're not quite the pterodactyls we would assume existed millions of years ago, but it looked relatively the same, more leathery type of skin. More so, I mean, is there something there? Is there some sort of crossover between ancient Native American pterodactyl type of creature versus this pie-saw bird?
Yeah, that's kind of amazing too, the people reporting this pterodactyl flying, or at least something that appears like that, and that's a rather large bird they're describing. And if you go back to the 1800s out west, they would have this they caught one of these pterodactyls, supposedly, bird-like thing. It did have a long beak at the front. It was as big as a barn, the wingspan. So, I mean, some people are saying it's fake, others were like, "It's kind of an amazing story," but, man, I'll tell
Have you
you
s
what.
have you seen War Games?
Yeah.
Do you see when the professor flies the pterodactyl?
Yeah,
Remember
yeah,
when he's flying it on his island?
yeah.
Yeah, that with the drone technology today, that could be a lot of things. Also, something that came up sort of in our after we did our last Bigfoot episode was, I got into some bioengineering stuff, and I was thinking that could apply possibly some bioengineering, and I was thinking the same thing on this bird. But it's such an ancient lore. I don't think it's that, but that's exactly what it looks like, is some bioengineering of some sort, but, um, what I was left with that it's, a Native American legend. Um, it could be real, could be, who's to say, um, but I haven't seen anything in the mainstream along the way in my life.
But I kinda, bioengineer, I could see something like nowadays, being messed with and stuff, but 1600s,
Right,
1700s,
right,
you
right.
know, and I don't know, maybe there were birds back then over in America that,
Good
were
point,
huge that
good point.
we couldn't describe and that nobody's seen before,
That
but they
we
had a
hadn't killed
legend.
yet that we
Right,
hadn't
right.
killed yet.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
This story kind of has similarity. I couldn't help thinking about the comparisons between this and the giant story. The origins being a cave again, right? You would when we talked about the giant, we were also talking about the old Native American lore here in America, right? Where they found the sandal and everything else, and they had, this kind of had somewhat the same type of characteristics of the story. Not only do you have cave, you also have like a battle to defeat this thing, right? By a Native American tribe at a cave, right? And the whole idea was to trap the giant into the cave. The same thing with this story of the bird, the Piasa bird. The Native American chief coming up with the story of using himself to lure in the bird, right? I mean, so it's interesting that we're seeing these comparisons in a Native American lore. And it goes back to a good question that you brought up, Jeff, which is what did they see it? Look, if we believe that this bird didn't exist or whatever, and we can get into that in a minute here, if we're going off of what they were possibly describing, what in America could that be? I mean, eh, I think if it, listen, I'm no bird expert, but I think the American, is it the condor that's the largest Native American bird to or North American bird? Is it the
Yeah.
condor?
I would have
It
to
w
look that up,
I
but
think it was,
Wendell's
yeah,
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 So
yeah.
but when you look at a condor, which I'm sure probably existed in more plentiful volume than it does now, back then, um, I don't think that they would have seen a condor and described this other thing. So it goes back to
Yeah, I
what you
don't either.
said, Jeff. What could they have seen that is even remotely looks like what they're describing?
right, and that's what gets me about all these stories of lore. I mean, something has to happen to spark somebody to start putting this out into stories and end up on hieroglyphs and stuff. So it would be amazing, if we could find out what they actually saw.
Let me ask you this, Steve, because you think the uniqueness is precious of these things as I do, and I know Jeff does, like the Bigfoot thing. Let's say they saw one of these today. What would you wanna do? Would you wanna put it in a zoo, take it down, or set it free? Because it does not look fan friendly.
No, and I think that's the thing. I think that's the if we're talking in today's technology,
Yeah,
everything we have in the world today, I think the problem is you can't let something like this exist with today's population. And, because listen, if we're talking about a Bigfoot, then I'm absolutely saying leave the thing alone, let it roam. Look, if we can capture enough evidence, but yet leave the sanctity of Bigfoot alone, without having to destroy. The problem is humans by nature are destructive. So when we see something pretty, we want to destroy it, right? We want to claim it as our own. We want to destroy it. We want to use it, what you were talking about, biohacking and engineering. We want to
yeah.
use that for military purposes. We can't just let beauty be beauty on its own, right? So, in my opinion, Wendell, to answer your question, you see something like this, and if it's what they're describing, I don't I unfortunately, as a human, you can't let this thing exist because it's especially if its main meal is going to be humans, right? You can't
Yeah,
Yeah,
it
yeah,
reminds
that's
me your
it's a
question.
delicate balance because you'll never if you were to see one, probably be the one of the few, if not the only one, and, to take something like that down would be quite the shame. No matter great whites are killers, but they're beautiful animals. Um, yeah, it would be a delicate balance. I don't know if I'd wanna take it down, but I definitely want to, what do you call, apprehend it, cage it, somehow control it, because you're right, free roaming, it's a danger if it's out there.
Well, it
Mm.
reminds me of when you watch these current Jurassic Parks, the movies Jurassic World, where kind of the theme of the new ones are that dinosaurs basically we brought them back and now they exist with us on land at the same time, right?
Yeah.
And then you had
Yeah.
that big that I don't know the name of the source out there in the ocean, the mammoth one, you know what I mean? And they always
Yeah.
showed you this thing sailing around with with the boats out there, the ships, and they always kind of show it lurking in the shadows. I think if you put the Piasa bird in today's world, I think it's kind of like that, right? It
Yeah,
it'd
I
kind of be
agree.
like having a Tyrannosaurus Rex somewhere on the
Yeah,
loose,
that can
right?
yeah.
fly.
Yeah,
That
that
can
can fly.
fly.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
even
yeah,
more.
Well,
yeah.
another thing about the pie-saw bird, the way they describe it is, it's got the glowing red eyes again, and that leads me to the, Mothman. I mean, because they describe it with an almost human face, and this thing's flying around and it has a body, and but the similarities drop out, when they start talking about the tail, and this ends up, a fish tail at the end, but very close to, the Mothman sightings and stuff.
Yeah, it almost seems like a spiritual,
Right,
um, a spiritual entity of some sort more than an animal cruising around the
right.
forest.
Almost like a phoenix of sorts,
Yeah, yeah, something like
like
that.
very
Maybe
symbolic.
maybe a ritual brings it, you know,
Yeah, yeah.
for a while. I don't wouldn't know, but, Yeah, seems like something like that because it is quite grand. It's a
Mhm.
majestic, bird.
Yeah, yeah.
Could the story be a reflection, a Native American reflection, almost like an anti-war campaign? Because they talked about how this bird's origins come from starting with warriors who were killed in action in battle. This thing first started feasting on the bodies of the warriors who were killed, right? And then eventually turned into going after live warriors and humans, and Native Americans, right? Could this be like kind of a symbolic story of the destruction of tribal warfare and could this been stories, kind of how we describe things, right? Like if we're trying to end a war or some sort of campaign, maybe this was one chief's ability to try to end wars that were killing off their natives between several tribal, I mean, could this be, it goes back what you were saying, could this be symbolic in a way, Wendell?
It could. I think so. It could be exaggerated. It could be, a story built on a story, built on a story. You're also talking about people that didn't have YouTube and TV to watch. So your mind would go to things. What if we had a lion and an eagle mix? How bad would that be? They told stories just like we tell stories. So, it could be that. It could be the pronunciation of stories layered on stories layered on stories. That's a good point. It could be a chief symbolic, story to get a political end, so to speak, of something going on. Uh, yeah.
Well, the one thing about lore, if you look at all these different characters, these monsters, they're a reflection of the humans. You got Frankenstein, and Frankenstein was defeating death and coming back to life. You have the werewolf, which was like us, that we get so angry, insatiable, destructive against other humans. You got the vampire, and it so on and so forth. But it's all back to a reflection of the humans. So yeah, it could
Beast w
be just beast
the be
within.
yeah, the beast within.
Yeah. Yeah. So this could be one of those stories that were passed down. And it's just a reflection of that tribe, what he's describing of how we act with each other.
You know, we talked about this with La Llorona, right? And how that tale had come through centuries and centuries of verbal stories and storytelling, right? And now it's spread across generations of ancient families all through today, right? And could this be something like that where potentially there were areas that the tribe felt were too dangerous to go in? So maybe they formulate this Piasa bird as a warning, especially starting with the kids. You go off, there's this monster, there's this bird with wings, and here's what it looks, and you got to make it look evil, right? You got to
Mm.
utilize some different elements from different animals that you guys deal with. They obviously Native Americans were very into deer as a hunting source, as things. So could this have been something like that where essentially maybe there was some sort of um kind of interaction with something dangerous out there, bear, something like that, and then they took it and said, well, this area is too dangerous. We don't want our tribes people to go here, and therefore there's this pie saw bird of comes from this cliff, comes from these caves. They
Yeah.
devour man. I don't know. I'm just thinking where something like this would have come from, and what would you have battled to describe this?
This takes us in so many different directions because it's lore. It could be symbolic. It could actually have existed back in the day, not in the form that it was drawn, but maybe a big bird that, and the one thing is, it's only in Alton, Illinois. There's no other hieroglyphs that I came across researching this bird. So maybe there was only one of them, so a bunch of different directions.
Yeah, like I said, it reminded me if you ever seen that movie Relic, uh, it was about a basilisk, uh, but a creature that basically hibernates for centuries,
Yeah.
something like
Yeah.
that, until the right conditions bring it out. So that's the tone I got from it. But Steve brought up some good points about, that could have been a symbol
Right.
of some sort as well to get a wanted end to something.
How
Uh,
about this? I'm going to throw a left ball here. I'm going to throw a curveball for you guys, taking it full circle like we always do, right? Could this have been a fallen angel who happened to land many, many years ago, something that's elemental and stayed in this area with all these cliffs and whatnot, right? I mean, if you think about it, if it was a fallen angel, it's going to have more of a cold heart. It's going to be more of what we think of the demons, right? What we think about them being fallen angels and whatnot, right? I mean, the thing wouldn't, I would assume, wouldn't look like an angel angelic once it fell to earth, right? Or fell to where the
mhm.
fallen angels have fallen. It would probably not look as beautiful as it once did as an angel, right? And maybe this thing is elemental, and that's why what attracted it. We talk about what attracts demons, right? We talked about what attracts demons too, like had the show about the Indiana Demon House, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times when we talk about how demons end up somewhere, the theories go that something very traumatic happened, or something very evil, a murder, or something of that, something like that. So maybe this thing could have existed there since the time of fallen angels, and there was all this tribal warfare, all this murdering and killing, and innocents being killed, and stuff. So what attracted this thing to it, right? This evil, this war, this bloodshed, this, you know what I mean? And here we go. And that could explain, Jeff, why maybe there was only one of them, right? Because this thing took that form. And we talk about how fallen angels probably take for all types of forms, right? We've mentioned that. So could this thing be a fallen angel?
Your guess is as good as mine on this one. It could be many different things. Again, like you were talking about, it could have been for child safety. If like say, um, one of the Indian tribe's child got lost in the woods, and then something attacked it. So when the parents finally found it and brought it home, they came up with this Piasa to keep the kids from going so far out in the woods. There's
Yeah.
a lot of tales for safety too.
There was nothing pleasant about the image of this thing.
Right.
It was like a war horse of something, something like that. So, um, I that sounds like as good explanation as any, Jeff. Like you said, a safety thing for to ward off, and that goes back to what Steve was saying to get to a symbol
Hmm.
to bring a certain end or manipulation that you want. That
Gotcha.
sounds logical.
To me, this was a great story, and I thank you, Ray, for submitting this to Steve. Steve, any last words about the pie saw?
I would just say, first of all, I love how this is, sometimes we talk about international stories and we talk about, it's awesome. I'm growing up here in Ohio. Illinois is a couple states over. And, just have kind of having this thing in your own backyard. It kind of teaches us of the geography right here, that these stories and this lore and all this, it's right in our own backyard. It's magical. It's mystical. It keeps your brain thinking about these things, and it kind of brings full circle a lot of the things that we've discussed. I mean, look, was it real? Was it not? I'm not exactly sure. I mean, from just a pure kind of, I guess, maybe scientific view of it, I mean, obviously, I don't see something exactly like this existing, but back then, like you mentioned, Jeff, there could have been birds that, like I said, we talked about the thunderbird. Could this thing been a form of a thunderbird? I'm still intrigued about how you come up with this description to describe
Right.
something that they had gone to war with. I mean, could this be, they talked about, Wendell, you've brought this up before, the berserkers, right? They talked about wolf men coming in right? That were killers. And what we find through history was these berserkers or these wolf men were just wearing the hide of a wolf, right? But they were scary and they were savage and they'd come in and they looked bloodthirsty and they would bludgeon. And so, that you took the whole idea of Wolfman into, but really looking back, what we actually saw were, like Wendell mentioned, berserkers. So I would love to know the other side of the story, whereas, like we talked about, who came up with this design, where did this come from, and essentially what could you have seen that would have kind of sparked this? So I think it's an
Yeah.
awesome tale.
Yeah, it is.
Wendell, any last words on the pie saw?
Well, like Steve said, I was surprised it was so close to Indiana. Heck, it's just over in St. Louis area.
Yeah.
Along the river. So, um, that was kind of neat that it was so close. I was a little concerned that I had never heard of it, but, um, I'm sure there's quite a few Native American legends that we're not familiar with, that we just haven't had those in our circles. But no, it was very interesting, and, I learned something, so that's always a good thing.
Gotcha. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, if you have a suggestion of what this might have been, whether it be lore, symbolism, whether it be a safety measure tale that you tell kids so that they're scared to go too far away, leave a comment below. Leave a comment below. And if you have a story for us that you'd like us to research and talk about, give us an email at buriedstories74@gmail.com. Thank you, guys. And tonight, we just say, don't let your story stay buried. Start digging.